All right, hello everyone. We're going to be talking with big boy Patryck here about IMB and myself as two people who are actually IMB graduates. Both of us have some similar stories and some differences in our experience, and I think it would be super helpful to many people if we sort of share what we thought about the degree, what we liked, what we didn't like, answer the long-standing question, is IMB a joke of a degree? Or is it actually viable? And so without further ado, we will start with answering some questions. But for those of you who don't know, Information Management for Business, or IMB, also known as Information Technology Management for Business, or ITMB, is a joint degree that exists in 12 universities in the UK. And it was started roughly a few years after 2000. So it was started by the Tech Partnership, which was founded in 2003. And from my experience, it has existed for roughly since that time. So UCL has had it for about 15 years. And the goal of this tech partnership and the degree is to bring together companies in technology and universities and create a program that can create individuals that are valuable to the digital economy and to the tech world. And it does that by combining technology skills and knowledge with business understanding, which is actually something that most companies consider very, very valuable. This is because usually you find people who are either very business or very technical. So there is actually a huge benefit in being someone in between. So this is basically what the degree is all about. And so the first thing we will talk about is how did we actually get into this degree? Like what grades we had, what we did before university, throwing us back centuries ago. But
Yeah, feels like it.
but Patryck, do you want to start with a little bit introduction about you and the things you did?
Sure, sure. Yeah, thanks, Krasimir. Good to be on this YouTube video. Yeah. Hey guys,
Indeed,
I'm
yeah.
Patryck. I'm from Poland originally, although I've lived all over the place. I've only lived in Poland for a year and a half of my life. Uh, I came to UCL to London same time as Krasimir. I'm in his class as well, and I took the same gap year at Cisco, although mine was in London and his was in California. So before IMB itself, I did the IB International Baccalaureate, kind of the equivalent of A levels internationally. So I did that in Dubai. That's where I lived beforehand. And in terms of grades, I had 37 points in total. So it's actually not that good of a score, to be honest, for a university like UCL. But my higher level subjects were very relevant. So I did business, I did computer science, and then I did ITGS. So it's kind of like it's information technology in a global society. It's a mix of sort of ethics and IT and a little bit of business as well. So it's very relevant to what IMB was. And then that's sort of how I applied for IMB. Although IMB was the only non-computer science with business course that I applied to. All other universities were computer science with business, but UCL had that Ching, that brand name, that UCL brand name. And in the end, that's sort of why I chose it, but also made sure that the modules were relevant and interesting to me.
So actually, what were the other courses you applied to? Like what
Yeah,
they're
so I applied in terms of universities, Birmingham University, King's, Aston, although Aston was only just to fill the space in UCAS. Aston, sorry Aston, but it's not that good of a uni from what I've seen. And then so University of Birmingham, King's, and I think that's it. I don't remember. Maybe there might have been one more, but that's all I remember. And they were computer science with business
okay,
degrees, all of them. And then UCL was the only one that was like ITMB, pretty much.
interesting. And what was your background? If you look back at the personal statement, what did you talk about to get into IMB?
Yeah. So I mean, I definitely mentioned my subjects because they're very relevant. I had a mix of sort of business and computer science, as I mentioned before. So it's very much relevant to what ITMB, IMB encompasses at its core. But also, I remember I mentioned so Duke of Edinburgh. I was involved in that. I completed
Mhm.
sort of my silver award, and then I kind of did my gold award. I've done like the trip and volunteering and all that. I just haven't done one part of it, so I don't officially have the gold one. But I was involved in DOV. And then I also was what was the role name? I was a digital leader at my school. So I pretty much helped promote sort of I guess, digital leadership, right, at the school. But one of the main projects that involved was introducing Google Cardboard to the school. So we sort of made a pitch to the principal, and then we got 100 Google Cardboard units that we then had in the library. Uh, and yeah, they started using them in like geography classes and so on. But that was only the very beginning. And then after I left, someone picked it up and moved it forward. So those were the main things I really talked about there on
Mhm,
my personal
mhm.
statement. What about you, Kras? Did you have any involvements outside of core studies?
Yeah, it's very interesting actually. I think I should start with saying I actually didn't plan on studying IT or technology. And for me, it was a really long story, but essentially, I just wanted to study business. And although I kind of like technology, I associated it a lot with I don't want to have a job where I just work at a desk for the rest of my life and just write code. Like for me, I didn't like that. I want to be
Yeah.
around people, and so I kind of associated business with being around people. Um, and that's why I excluded IT as an option. But then I saw this degree, and I saw that it's from UCL, and I was like, I am not sure if I want to study IT or technology, and I was
Hmm.
still more of a business side focus. But I was okay with taking part of IT and learning that alongside my studies. And so I wasn't consciously trying to study a tech degree. And I think that was actually the case for most people from my experience, that most people just went into the degree mostly focused on the business side. And I think that could be changing in recent years, um, but yeah, that was my focus. And so what I did before I applied to the degree, I was involved in, obviously I did debating. So debating was sort of the biggest thing that stood out for me, and I did it for 3 years competitively. I was in the national team, so even though it was not explicitly business related, it was the thing that I think I could connect at least in some ways, and was like an impressive achievement. But then at the same time, I actually did a lot of business related things as well. And although I didn't have something as impressive of an achievement, I guess depends on how you look at it. But we did a few events. We started one startup project, um, and then we had an investor who was interested in us. But we didn't really take this further. I mean, we just did a competition. We got to national finals in Bulgaria, and that was pretty much my business experience. But I liked the area, and so I kind of took both of these things to talk about. And then my grades, I had relatively high grades, but
And
not
you didn't
high.
do A levels, right? You did a sort of
Oh
national
yeah, that was the other
Bulgarian.
thing. I actually did Bulgarian diploma. I don't know how this converts to A levels, but I had high grades, so I had higher than AAA. Um, and although I had high grades, my grades were not high enough to get into computer science in UCL. So I still had very high grades for most places, but it was like short of computer science. And so I didn't, I mean, anyway, I wasn't planning on applying for computer science, but even if I wanted to, I actually didn't really have perfect grades.
Mhm.
So that was another thing. Something else is that I think we were sort of, I mean, we were perceived by the department as very good students throughout, and
Yeah.
both me and Patrick have been invited to multiple events to talk about the course and to talk to new students.
Hmm.
So I think we probably both have things that we could share that probably stood out as well, and things that maybe were what made us get into the degree.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's any magical recipe out there. Like I can't 400% certain say if you do DOV in my case, you're gonna get in. By no means that's not the case. But I think for me, I think it's definitely the fact that you do something outside of your core studies. Because grades, that's just an entry requirement. But everything you do outside of your studies, or maybe just sort of your approach to life, or your demonstrated interest in the sort of IT space, that's sort of what gets you in. So I remember in my personal statement, I mentioned the fact that I'm a digital leader. I think they value some sort of leadership skills, and like Christina
Mm,
was organizing events, that's still
yeah.
leadership, taking initiative to do something, organize something,
Mm,
improve, student welfare, whatever it might be. being involved in a school in that kind of sense, I think is very, very beneficial. And then for me on the technical side, I I mean, I am like much more technical than Krasimir from in terms of background. So I did computer science, HL. I got level 6, almost level 7 as well. But yeah, for me, I really enjoy sort of a more deeper technical understanding. And I mentioned the fact that I built like my own PC when I was younger. So I'm really into like hardware, like PC stuff as well. So that's sort of what I think got me in. It was a mix of leadership and just showing that I have initiative to do things outside of my core requirements, which were basically passing the like IB diploma in my case and getting a certain amount of points.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I think it's interesting. So yeah, like as I said, you can be technical like Patryck, and I think Patryck is more on the technical side, which is like not that common. Um, but yeah, like I am not a technical person, or at least I was not before I came to UCL. So that's also like if you're not technical, it doesn't mean you shouldn't apply as long as you're interested in technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so if you have technical experience, it's obviously useful. Um, but then I think it will be useful if I also share my perspective on what I think got me in. So I actually remember I think it was the first day that they got us all together and they were sort of introducing the course. And one of the module leaders was mentioning how they're very interesting people in the audience. And I remember he was saying that one person, for example, was doing baking competitions, but she was very good at it. Like she has been competing in. So she was from China, but she was that good at baking that she went internationally to compete. Um, and I don't remember the other people, but I remember they also mentioned me because of the debating. And I think because they mentioned those things, I think they had a conscious focus on we want to also pick people who are interesting and who have been leaders in something or have achieved results. It doesn't have to be that they started a startup or they built a robot or something that is super tightly focused to the degree, but they appreciate that you have certain passion and that you followed it and that you achieved results in that passion. And also, I think they do value leadership. So if you took initiative to organize things, um, I think that's very valuable. But they just want to see that you're an impressive person, I think. Um, that you have taken initiative outside of your studies. And then ideally, yeah, you would be with some relevant skills to this. So you would have done something business related, something technical related. Um, but that was just my observation. And what I wrote about in my personal statement was, yeah, like just debating. I did organize things. So I was running a debating club. Like I started and was running a debating club. I organized a competition in Bulgaria for debating. Um, and I think that probably stood out to them more, right? Because when they were talking about me, they didn't mention anything about the business things that I was doing. For them, it was really interesting that, okay, he took this debating thing and he took it far and he showed leadership in it. He demonstrated that he achieved results and he was passionate about it. And for them, that was something interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps to go the extra mile. They just want someone who can get involved, who can put in work, put in effort into something that they're passionate about, have interested in, and that really does help. And I think it shows through the people that I've met in the course. There are just some that are there's a lot of like driven people, but those are most of the time people who were involved in a lot of things previously as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the next thing we can cover is what did we expect and is that what actually was the degree?
Yeah, you want to start?
Sure, I can have a go. So I definitely didn't know what to expect. And I think this is a very common thing where people are not sure what to expect from the degree. I mean, even the name.
I mean, we were 17, 18. It's
Yeah.
different lives completely.
And also information management for business. Even now, I don't know what the heck is this supposed to mean. So I was just a little confused. I knew I wanted to study business, and that seemed like it was mostly business. I was really taking a lot of blind shot at it. Um, and I did expect it to be mostly business, but I didn't actually have any ideas to like the ratio of business versus technology. So I would say that although I didn't have a clear expectation, I think that my expectations changed in the sense that I realized it is largely business. I think I maybe expected it to be a little bit more technology. But if I have to give somewhat of a ratio, to me it feels like an 80-20, mostly maybe 70 to 30% business versus
Mhm.
technology. It's definitely not more than 30% technology in
Yeah,
my.
I'd agree with the 70-30. I feel, especially like with the electives you have in year two and year three.
Yeah,
Assuming those carry on for next few years, you can 70-30 is achievable.
yeah. But other than that, I think most of my expectations were there. I think I expected that I would be. I think I'm not criticizing people on the course, but I think that one of the things that for me was disappointing that there were a lot of people in group projects and a lot of people that just weren't to the standard that I wished they were.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and as I said, like both me and Patryck were actually some of the top students on the course. And so it was kind of disappointing when you see that there are a lot of people who are below that standard. Um, and I think that is definitely changing in recent years. Like, I definitely think that this is much better in the last few years. And I mean, this is only a 15 years old degree, so it's still building up. But I don't think this is a reason not to apply. But I just expected that people will be
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more driven on average
Yeah.
and a little bit
But
more.
I feel like this is also something that like is replicated across degrees in universities. It's not
Mhm.
singular to
Yeah,
IMB
yeah, for sure.
necessarily. Like you'll experience some degree of this in any kind of work you do. Uh, but yeah, you might in IMB as well if you're like from a more driven background, then definitely I feel like a lot of people I don't know if it's like a wrong assumption, but I think a lot of people, the way they sort of have their mindset on IMB, okay, they're just going to do the degree, they're going to get a job at their parents company, and they're going to go back home, they already kind of have a job sort of
Yeah,
figured out there, they don't care much about the degree. So I think
right.
that's sort of what it goes down to at the core. They're doing the degree for the sake of doing the degree. They're not
Mm.
really interested or driven in actually wanting to learn.
Yeah, and that is to say, UCL as a whole, like the quality of people that you find at UCL are still really high. Like you still
Mhm.
meet exceptional people. So I'm not like, if I were to compare the people at UCL to like another university that is lower ranked, you can see a clear
Okay.
difference, right? Like, but what I'm saying is just within UCL, like obviously, like within my context of UCL, I wish that the people on average were more driven, but it makes sense also. Like, not everyone has the same motivation. Um, for me and maybe for Patryck, I genuinely wanted to study this degree and I
Mhm.
wanted to put in the effort and learn a lot out of it. So I think this obviously changes my motivation compared to someone who has a relatively stable future and you just kind of need to get the degree, right? Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that they're not driven people. I think all people were really smart, but not necessarily had the same motivation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah, I haven't really met. It's very very few people that I've met that aren't like what I'll call smart in terms of like academic sense. It's
Yeah,
just I think the driving motivation factor. Like everyone is capable in IMB. They're at
yeah.
UCL. They got in somehow, right? They have the necessary educational requirements and all that stuff, but they're not driven to put in a little bit extra, which does impact group coursework, especially when you have one or two like really driven people, and then the rest are kind of like two steps below in terms of wanting to do well in that assignment.
Mm. And what would you say in terms of you, like, did it match your
Mhm.
expectations or were there things that were different?
Yeah, so for me, similarly to you, I also didn't come with any like specific expectations. I mean, at the time, I was going into university. I didn't know like London, not London, like that didn't even cross my mind. My dad was or like the person who convinced me to go into UCL because of its brand and the fact that it's in London. I mean, King's was in London as well, but like UCL had that edge. And I think, I mean, I don't know what's, my other timelines would have been like, but I think it definitely does help ultimately. But I did expect sort of a little bit more tech.
Mm,
I went over the modules briefly, but as like a 18-year-old or however old I was back
yeah,
then, I didn't really dig down into much. It's just, hey, university, cool. I'll see what it is.
yeah,
But yeah, I expect a little bit more tech. I thought it'd be maybe like 55% business, 45 tech. But yeah, I'd say it's more like 70-30 in terms of ratio. Maybe you can get it to like 65-45 if all of your electives are sort of tech heavy. But yeah, I expected more technology. Although that's not to say the amount of topics covered weren't good. They were definitely still very good and useful. I think that they provide a great foundation. If you're interested in one from like year one or year two, if you pick some electives in that direction, it's going to set you up really well. But me coming from like having done computer science, I'd say 30% of what I've learned at IMB. So basic programming in Java, databases, sort of structuring databases and how relational databases work. 30% of that I've already done in the past. So it was just revision for me, which was a little bit of a shame. I was like, you don't really learn much. But university is like, as soon as you're in university, you learn it's a lot more about just the degree. Because in the UK, I don't know if it's every university, but a lot of universities is just 12 hours that you have of sort of face-to-face teaching for a bachelor's degree per week, which isn't much considering in like normal school terms. Beforehand, you'd be in school 7 hours a day with 1 hour breaks or whatever it might be. So that was a little bit of a shock to me in terms of the amount of stuff you learn. It's not as much, but there's a lot that like you learn about like group coursework. I didn't have any expectations on like the courseworks and group coursework, but I really, in the end, I really enjoyed the fact that we had a lot of group coursework because you learn to like work with people who are very difficult to learn.
mm,
I didn't have much group coursework in the past at school, so I think this was very valuable. But yeah, in terms of tech to business ratio, I wish that was a little bit higher. I also wish there was a little bit more math. So math was never my strong subject. I think I
yeah,
got, I mean, I did math SL before. I got 5 points out of 7, which is not great at all. I was very close to 6, but
yeah.
still, it was the coursework part that dropped me down. But yeah, I wish there was a little bit more math, even though if math isn't very useful to a lot of people's sort of future career aspirations, it's still, I think, at a university level, you go in depth into some subjects at such a much better um, level, and also the quality of teaching. I mean, it's UCL, you have access to good lecturers. A little bit more math wouldn't hurt. We only had one stats module, which is fine for like most purposes, but I wish there was a little bit more, because I feel like that sort of limits you if you want to go into something a little bit more mathematically involved in the future. You don't have the prerequisites of necessary math modules and experience. Whatnot. So I think that briefly sums up sort of my expectations and what it was actually like.
Yeah, and I think this will be useful. We'll get back to some of these topics when we talk about
Mhm.
um, future studies and employment opportunity, how IMB actually relates to things in the future because of this 70 to 30% split. Um, but the next question that I actually thought about is maybe it would be useful to talk about briefly what living in London was like as well for people.
Absolutely.
I can start. So I actually, one of my motivations to come to UCL was that I'll be in London. And for me, it was obvious that I would prefer to be in big cities for two reasons. First, I just generally wanted to be around people, and I think that big cities give you more opportunities to learn many things. It's more dynamic. It's more things happening. The second thing that was obvious and turned out to be the case was that if you're in a big city, obviously all the big companies are here, um, and then you can go to interviews, like you don't have to travel, and that made it really convenient for me to actually go for job interviews, for example. Like I just take the tube, and in half an hour I can be at the job place that I'm interviewing with, and for me that was quite a big benefit as well. um, but as a whole, I love London still. It's actually my favorite city. And I've lived in California as well, in San Francisco, and I've traveled a lot of cities. London is such an amazing city.
Mhm.
It is so well connected, like you can get to any point of London so
Yeah,
easily.
transport infrastructure is next level. I haven't seen anything like
Absolutely
that anywhere else.
super, yeah, super convenient. And I think the other thing is just first it's very diverse, which is amazing. Like it's so many different people, and it was the first time in my life that I didn't feel like there was a majority of people. And
Yeah,
this is
same.
still the case. Yeah, it's still the case for most countries where you can see that there is a majority of one nationality.
Yeah. Even
But
in
in
like a place
London,
like Dubai, or like I lived in the past, it's an international city, but London is
yeah,
such a bigger mixed bag. It's really good to
yeah.
experience.
I think London is probably the most diverse city in the world, to be honest. Like, I would be surprised if there's some city that's more
Hmm.
diverse because you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
get all the European people, so many different nationalities,
Hmm.
so many different people who are
Yeah,
like,
Asia and Europe, I'd say, are like the majority sort of
yeah,
populations, groups of people you see there from all over the place. I
yeah,
mean, our course, I don't remember the amount of like nationalities we had, but we had like 30 or
it
something.
was really diverse.
Um,
Yeah. We didn't even have many British people, to be honest. Like, I
Yeah,
think
I
British
mean,
people are,
British is still like the. I remember at the very beginning in that first sort of presentation that they gave to us, British people were still like the highest
mm,
percentage of people, not like more than 50, but the highest group percentage wise. Then it was Chinese and then Romanian. But these
okay.
British people, they come from like different background.
Mm,
Like their parents might have immigrated from somewhere in Asia or elsewhere. So it's still very diverse perspectives that they bring with them,
mm.
and different backgrounds for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing in London, by the way, that I was thinking is
Mm.
first the diversity. I personally loved it. You feel like you belong just
Mhm.
because everyone is different. And therefore, there is no like a group that dominates
Mhm.
social norms. So
Yes.
everyone sort of belongs. But the other thing is like there is so many things going on in London at any given time. I mean, now in COVID, that's probably a bit different, but there were so many different events happening. And I think if you're looking for it, regardless of what your interests are, you can most likely find other people in London that share the same interests, that organize the same activities.
Yeah.
And I just think I wouldn't live in any other city, definitely not in Europe.
Hmm.
It's an amazing city to be in.
Yeah. 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 The only thing, like, if you're someone that doesn't like cities, I'd say have a close look at London, because for me, it's such a busy city. I mean, I still like London. I prefer living in cities. I've pretty much lived in cities my entire life. But London it's a very busy place, very very busy.
Mhm.
Like at first I was kind of like, whoa, okay, it's a little bit too many people still sometimes there.
Yeah.
Like before COVID, it's like, okay, there's too many people here. But you get used to it. But those people bring, like Christine said, opportunities, all sorts of activities over there. There's what, 8 million, I think, in London people. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point because I've had friends who come to London and just it's too overwhelming for them.
mhm.
Like the amount
Yeah,
of
you get
people.
used to it after a while. But if you're someone that like wants quiet, you want to live in like a smaller city, town, whatever it might be, then maybe reconsider your London, or go visit London.
Mhm.
Because yeah, it's if you really don't like that environment, like if you're very against it, then you might sort of struggle getting used to it.
Yeah, that's totally true.
But universities in London are top notch, so it's kind of a payoff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's worth it, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
good point.
Yeah, so I actually, before we got into the next section, I have a, like, I guess, an interesting, funny story that happened to me when I first came to London. So my dad was supposed to come with me to help me sort of settle in. That's what we did with my brother, who was like 2 years older. So he's been in London then. So I was supposed to go with my dad, and he had like a conference as well in like the upcoming few weeks of sort of my start date. So he had like proposed some dates, and then I found a flight that was cheaper. So I told my dad, hey, if I found a flight that's cheaper, should I book it? He was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But he was like working, so I was like, yeah, yeah, like without actually necessarily fully listening to what I was saying. So I booked it, and he's like, why'd you book it on this date? I have the conference. So in the end, I went alone to London, and oof, it was so much harder. I had to like fit everything into one suitcase, and I had like my pillow, my bed sheets, everything in there. I don't know how I survived with just like one large suitcase, but I did. And also, like so I landed, yeah, I think it was Heathrow. I went to Paddington with Heathrow Express, and then to get to my accommodation, I had to also take the bus. And the thing in London is buses won't always stop. You kind of have to wave at them. So I was standing in my bus stop there, confused guy from like Dubai, standing there, stressed out in a new big city. And like I see my bus coming. Like I have the app on my phone and whatnot. I bought some data package and a vending machine at the airport, and then the bus just goes zoom past me. I'm like, what? But then I noticed people like who took buses after me. They like wave at the bus. I'm like, oh, yeah. But I have to like wait 20 minutes for an extra bus. So if you go to London and you take the bus, wave at the bus, because that doesn't happen in other European cities. They just stop if they see a person. But no, my bus passed me.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's yeah. I think I didn't realize this because it's also the same in Bulgaria and
Oh,
I
okay,
think in
yeah, yeah.
Europe,
No, it was yeah, it was a bit of a shock to me.
which is like
And
waving
yeah,
at
if you're coming with parents, double check the ticket thing, because it's easier
yeah,
when you have like a second suitcase with stuff to bring along.
yeah, yeah. No, I actually only came with one suitcase as well, but I didn't really carry much stuff, and I just bought a lot of things in London, to be
Okay,
honest.
yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
Uh,
I lived like a rat almost like the first year. I bought so little, um, but also
yeah.
like the value of money. It took me like a month and a half to learn the value of money. Because at the beginning, like because I didn't have like a card local there. I had like an international card, and they charge like fees and stuff on it. So like my brother, he was already there. He'd give me cash, and like he gave me like £200 once to go shopping. Like after 1 week, I spent £200. Nowadays, like I spend like 300, 400 per month. Like it was apart from rent. So yeah, the value of money took me a little bit to get used to, and how expensive everything is there.
Yeah, London is definitely expensive. I think we should say that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's no joke. I think, I mean, I was a person who didn't come with much money and I pulled through.
Hmm.
It was really hard, but it's definitely a very expensive city and it's also something to take into account. I have a video actually about the costs in London if you're on a budget.
Check
So
it
I think,
out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll link it in the cards. So yeah, cool. So let's actually talk about what we actually study in IMB. I mean, people can also look at the
Hmm.
course contents and the module, but I think it would be useful to say, okay, this is what we studied,
Hmm.
and this is how it differs from management science, which is also something that people are considering, I think, a lot of the time.
Should I go over the technical ones? I have all my notes open, so I roughly remember them.
Yeah, if you have something now, otherwise,
Yeah,
I'm happy
sure.
to.
Yeah. So in terms of like technical modules, in the first year, we had programming one, which is so we did Java. I don't know if that's changed now, but it was just basic Java. And then year two, you have programming two to kind of build on that Java knowledge. And it's very entry level. So like if you come from like a non-tech background at all, it's very entry level. Although it's a lot easier if you do come from a tech background. I know some people struggled a lot with that, but honestly, like I think if you put in the effort, I don't know what it was like for you, Krasimir, but I feel like if you put in the effort for that module, and if you struggle with programming as a whole, if you just put in a little bit extra effort, you'll be able to understand it fairly easily because it's basic concepts that they cover.
Yeah, totally. You don't need a technical background to study IMB.
Right. Ooh, first year we also had web technologies. So it was a mix of stuff we did. We did a little bit of like JavaScript, a little bit of JSON, HTML, some CSS. I did HTML, CSS before, so that was like a nice sort of refresher. But yeah, so I think in the first year it's actually fairly heavy on the technical side. Um, we had
I
information
agree. Yeah.
systems as well. That was sort of technical diagrams that you show to a
Mhm,
business
mhm,
audience, learning a little bit more about like architecture and like the cloud.
mhm.
And yeah, I think that's all that we had in year one, right? Don't remember anything else. But yeah, year one it's fairly like I'd say it's like 50% technical,
Yeah,
whereas year
yeah.
two sort of and year three starts to fade more into like management.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, you don't need technical background, and also I would say it does feel like it reduces from first year. But sort of the key takeaways that I had in terms of technical modules were um, software engineering, um,
As in,
programming as like databases, web development.
mhm.
So you kind of get a brief overview of how to be a software engineer. So you
Yeah, yeah.
technically have foundations, but those foundations are very, very like basic. Like you don't
Yeah,
cover enough.
you're not going to become like an expert, Python programmer
Yeah.
from the degree or a perfect programmer. It's something just to get you into that sort of area, and if you're interested, you pursue it further. Whether in the weekends you take some coding classes, do some coding on the side, or you pick electives that are more relevant. But I think it serves more as sort of having a general overview and having the basic skills. So like I think as someone who's like business heavy and you don't want to do anything programming heavy in the future, just having all that exposure, if you see code in the future, you can briefly understand the basics of what it's doing. So I think that it's helpful in that respect.
Hmm. Yeah, it is possible to become a software engineer from IMB, um, but it is not very common because
Hmm.
you need to actually spend extra time to
Yeah,
study.
you won't be a software engineer just by learning the technical stuff from the modules. You need to do
Yeah,
something outside
yeah,
of it.
yeah. It's definitely, I would say, like what you learn in the degree, if you want to be a software engineer, is probably like 20% of what you need. So the other 80%, 70, 80% you just need to learn on your own,
Yeah.
like whether doing some boot camps or courses online.
Yeah.
Um,
You
but
definitely, I think, have a good like introduction to all the areas that are relevant to sort of software engineering, but it's just the depth that's lacking.
yeah,
But you do
yeah,
know
for
like
sure.
what's involved.
Yeah.
Front end web development, back end web development, programming, software engineering, sort of working agile and all that. Um, it's a very good overview, but yeah, it just doesn't go deep.
And by the way, I do think that it's helpful to study IMB even if you want to be a software engineer in the future, but you don't have a background now, because I think
Mhm.
even these foundations, like they do help a little bit to bring you closer into the field.
Yes, yeah.
So I mean, for me, like I want to be a software engineer in the future at some point, and I wasn't technical at all before I started the degree. And I've learned a lot afterwards on my own, and I want to learn more in the future. But it
Mhm.
definitely helps, because when you start learning software engineering on your own, like you see how things here and there from the degree come handy and they come useful. And actually, another thing that I should really point out is, if you want to be an entrepreneur and do startups, the breadth of things that you learn in IMB is actually amazing. Like you learn so many different things that come in handy. Like for example, if I wanted to build now a startup, I already have a lot of knowledge on different areas that most people
Mhm.
just don't have. And one practical example of this is, I can have an idea and I'm able to go through the process of how do I turn this idea into a product, how do I carry out interviews with people to understand what product I should build. Then I can build a prototype on my own. If it's a phone application, I know how to build a prototype, right?
Mhm.
Maybe I'm not able to code this prototype, but I'm able to build something that I can go and present to people. And also I can build a, I mean, you can use website builders. That's not very hard, but I think
Wix.com, not sponsored.
Wix.com. Yeah. But I think what I find really valuable from IMB is that I have a far better understanding of how to build a product, how to understand requirements for building
Mhm.
something, and just a lot of things that come in handy if you want to build things in the technology industry in the future.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. Like if you come in like to the degree and you want to like work for yourself, build a business up, even if you don't have that idea, IMB will set you up. As long as sort of your idea is in the technical space. Like if it was in the medical space, maybe it's not the most useful, unless it's like medtech.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you want to just build some generic, some business related, maybe a little bit technically related, uh, company in the future, yeah, I definitely agree. IMB equips you with so many things. And I think even in like a past video, you mentioned IMB makes you a little bit more of a generalist, not a specialist.
Mhm. Yeah.
But that carries some really good advantages. And I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this sort of discussion. But it translates into the opportunities in terms of jobs afterwards,
Mhm.
because people from this course are all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, it's a really wide degree, and it has a lot of benefits. Um, by the way, to be honest, I don't think studying a business degree is worth it. Like, I think you should either
Unless
go
it's like
for
MBA, but
maybe
that's
an MBA. Even MBA is very questionable at this point, but I
it's
think
good
if
for salary hikes if you're like senior management.
yeah,
But
like it,
don't do it for the sake of doing it.
yeah, even MBA like are losing respect now, but
Mhm.
it's kind of like business degree is like, in my point of view, business degree is very useless now because the world is turning into technology. Technology is super fundamental in order to be able to actually influence change and like
Mm-hmm.
bring something useful. And so unless you're studying at least IMB, I think it's not worth studying a business degree anymore. Like business administration or all these things, like they're just not that useful anymore. Of course, there is a need for them, but to really be useful in the world, you need to have technology understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I would only go as far to say that the only thing that is better is learning harder skills. So like if you study computer science, I think that's better. If you study engineering, I think that's better. But I think it's important to have at least some business understanding and some understanding of how things work, like how demand and supply works, like basic things like this in order to be able
Mm-hmm.
to also start a business in the future and have this entrepreneurial mindset. So I think IMB is good, a
Mm-hmm.
mix. Um, but I think you should understand that technology is super important. And if you wanted to pick a better degree than IMB in quote unquote, I think the only thing that's better is actually going for hard skills like engineering. Um, maybe, I mean, if you think of the important areas in the future, like obviously like things like chemistry, biology, engineering, basically STEM subject will be super important, right? So like the more hard skills you have in STEM, the more valuable you are. um, and so while I think IMB can give you some background to many different things, you're far more valuable and far more capable if you have hard skills. Although IMB still equips you with the ability to manage other people, which in some cases can be more valuable, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's something that's fairly rare as well, like strictly sort of STEM subjects if you're doing
yeah.
computer science. And I think sort of in that, what helps with that is the variety of courseworks that we had. So like in year one, although I wish we had a little bit more of that, in year two, we did like presentations, like poster presentations. And that was useful. I mean, I don't know what kind of coursework computer science has at UCL, but I'm pretty sure they don't have as much sort of interactivity and that presenting part of work, which even though it's basic, it's cool. It's a group coursework for a module worth 20% or whatever, but it helps. All of that combined really helps you sort of manage people. And a lot of people from our degree, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, they end up having leadership roles in societies at UCL.
Hmm.
Maybe it's the type of people that I get into the degree, or maybe it's just the kind of people the degree fosters, or maybe we're just highlighted the importance of sort of getting involved and having the extra responsibility uh, that sort of impacts that in the end. But yeah, a lot of people get involved in leadership positions within societies. So that's a bit of a pointer of IMB in terms of managerial, I guess, build up.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's a great degree though. Like in terms of graduate opportunities, you're fine. Like you'll have a great job for sure if you study
Yeah, yeah.
IMB. So it's just more in terms of value added, but I think it's a great degree as a whole. Like I would want it to be more technical in the future, like more of a 50-50, where ideally finishing the degree, you should be almost able to be a software engineer. Like that's for me the ideal world of where this degree should lead you, because I do
Hmm.
think you need depth as well.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good segue to go into just briefly. I think we should just mention what's the difference between IMB and management science. And I can start. So management science is a great degree as well. Two of those, it's basically IMB and management science that are the highlight degrees at UCL for business plus technology. So the difference is that management science is more of a business plus maths and stats, where you will become good at like data analysis. Potentially, you can go into data science. Whereas IMB makes you more all-rounded technical person. So you're not just focused on data, which is just one part of the technology.
Hmm.
You actually understand software and technology as a whole. And data is one part of it, right? So we also study data. We had statistics as well. We've had big data like modules. And so you have less of the data part than management science, but we have a wider understanding of technology. And if I have to give my opinion, I personally think what we're studying is better, because if you're studying management science, I mean, data is an important area. Don't get me wrong, data is super, super important. But I don't think there is something specific to management science that makes it stand out that much as a degree. Like I think if you're a
Hmm.
data scientist or an IMB person, you can achieve roughly the same results as if you were to achieve in management science and more,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So you can literally achieve the same results that you would achieve in management science if you're in IMB, pretty much, and more than that, right? So you
Hmm.
even have more diversity to go into other areas as well.
Yeah,
That's
I think if you sort of come into university knowing that, hey, I want to be kind of doing a business role, but I want to be heavily focused on sort of the data side. If you have previous experience or whatever, then maybe management science is a better option. But if you're sort of unsure, and that's sort of how I came into IMB, I still wasn't sure. I know I wanted to work at a tech company for sure, but maybe more of a business role, like you, Krasimir, as well. I didn't want to be like programming nonstop for the entire
yeah.
day at work. I think IMB is better, and I think for a lot of people before university, you'll see how much university like changes your mindset in terms of like future job opportunities and the reality of life. IMB is a good pathway to go. Because if you want to be a little bit more heavy on the data side, take an elective. I had a data elective earlier this year. Do something extra, do some internships related to that. You can get into that. It's not a problem. So it depends on how specific that you want your job to be by the time you come into uni.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a thing. If you're for sure want to be focused on data, you can go for it. Um, but I value wide experience.
Mhm.
And so for
Yeah.
me, it just makes sense. Like if I wanted to be an entrepreneur in the future, or if I wanted to be a manager in the future, it's just valuable to have breadth of experience and understanding in more topics.
Yep.
Just my
Agreed.
personal impression. Cool. So I think now it's a good moment to start talking about what are
Okay.
actually the employment opportunities and
Hey.
not just employment, but also future studies and
Mhm.
basically life after IMB.
Yeah.
And so I think I can start with just my
Sure.
observation and then
Mhm.
I can hear from Patrick as well. So in terms of employment, you have, at least from me, what I realized is that most people will get a good job after the degree. Like it's a very desirable degree. Employers find it valuable. And
Mhm.
obviously, if you start from the context of, okay, we're going into a tech world, it's just the truth, right? So IMB gives a lot of valuable skills where people actually like people who are diverse in their experience, and then people go on to learn additional things. The most typical thing, and actually I think I should say this as well, when I came into the degree, I actually was far more scared that I will not be able to get a job
Mhm.
than when I came at the end of the degree. And I think this might be common for many people. Like obviously in the beginning you're anxious, like yeah, you see all these people getting jobs at like good companies, but you don't know if that will be you in a few years, right?
Yeah. Like in the first year, it's kind of stressful because you're introduced into the whole sort of professional
Yeah,
pathway, and you're kind of like, these people are getting into banks. What are they doing?
yeah,
What's the secret recipe? What are they doing that I don't have? Maybe they did something that I'm not gonna be able to do. That all
yeah,
runs through your head. But yeah, after you ease in, and you do have to do a little bit more than like just the core studies. Get involved in something. I think that's definitely helpful. It would never not be helpful. But yeah, your mindset will change after first year. After you get the initial exposure.
yeah. And I think you definitely see how just so many people end up getting like nice jobs afterwards. And I think what I want to say is like you'll probably be too scared in the beginning,
Hmm.
like far more scared than you should be. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I still think you should put in the effort.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and of course, it's also like not gonna come to you like just for being an
Yeah,
IMB.
if you just chill there, if you only put in
Yeah,
15 hours per week and then vacation off in Hyde Park, yeah, good
yeah,
luck. No employer is gonna want you if you approach any kind of work that way, most
yeah.
likely.
Yeah, exactly. So it's still about being a great person. But I mean, I think most people in IMB are anyway um, good and hireable people.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so you just kind of get to see at the end, okay, they go into like all these nice jobs. And
Hmm.
so what are the jobs that people in IMB go into? I think we could have pulled like a study on this because I think there might be some like data breakdown, but just from our observation, like most people go into business roles, right? So that's like
Yeah.
pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So they would go into banks like JP Morgan
Yeah,
and
sort of in the finance pathway, it's fairly like it might not be finance heavy, but it's within the finance world. A
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
people
super. I
definitely go
think
there.
finance might be the single biggest one.
It might
Like,
be, yeah, it might be the largest group of people,
yeah, probably. And
or at
then
least from like 2 years
consulting.
ago. Maybe it's changed now, but from what I've
Yeah, I'm
heard.
pretty sure it's still like because banks also advertise a lot on university. Like,
Yes, yeah, and UCL is like a perfect like cherry pick for banks. They love
yeah,
UCL. They love picking up people.
yeah, yeah. It's a very like tight system where yeah, like most people just go in banks.
Hmm.
Consulting is
Yeah,
very
consulting I think is
popular.
fairly large, and I think it's growing. I definitely see an interest in consulting. I mean that's sort of my internship this summer is sort of to build up my potential career in that. I want to explore it a little bit
Mm,
more. But yeah, I think consulting is a great pathway, and the IMB people especially, you develop the skills necessary for that. And there's a lot of people in consulting, although maybe not necessarily BCG, McKinsey, not
yeah.
the big three as they're known by, but like the big four. I don't know, like KPMG, Deloitte, EY, and PwC. There's a
Yeah.
fair share of alumni there.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think actually, yeah, consulting might not be the second biggest. I think probably the second biggest is just business roles within any
Yeah.
company. So you would just have like all these people who become like business analyst or business something, whatever,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah, just like these general
Yeah.
business roles.
Product managers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's a large chunk of the people. So they could be in tech companies, most likely. I think they are.
Yeah.
From my
Yeah.
observations, like people just go in these tech companies or banks or whatever, but they do these business roles.
Yeah.
So that's also a good,
Yeah.
a big chunk.
Yeah.
Then
And
it,
then yeah, software engineering, as you mentioned before, it's I think a fairly small, like a few percent people go into like hardcore software engineering afterwards. But a good chunk of people get into. I know Amazon is a fairly popular kind of employer
Mhm.
within IMB. I don't know about percentage wise, but a lot of people definitely target Amazon. And I'm not talking about like warehouse employees. I'm talking like their actual operations. So I know they have some stuff in like consulting,
Yeah,
financial analysts, a lot of business analysts. I think that's where a big chunk of people goes to project management. But yeah, like Krasimir said, it's a lot of business roles or sort of business focused roles with maybe a little bit of tech, but then tech companies because you need to understand sort of how whatever you're doing works hand in hand with business operations within a technical sort of environment.
yeah. I think I can actually add on this.
Yeah, you
In
were a
terms
business
of,
analyst, right, at Amazon?
yeah. So I think because of like when I worked in Amazon, actually things have changed a lot in the
Hmm.
last 2 years for IMB and Amazon.
Yeah.
Um, So when I worked at Amazon, my internship, I think I was one of the very few people from IMB who was actually like to then go and work for Amazon. Like I think I knew
Hmm.
just there was one person from our degree who did it the year before me. And then there was one person who came to like a graduate event once. And it was really rare. I mean, people from IMB were not going to Amazon at the rate that they were. Like back in my days, as I would say it, I felt like I was
You
one of
thought
the
so.
no, it was really like I was one of the very few people who went to
Hmm.
Amazon from our degree, and like this seemed like a relatively unachievable thing. And I noticed how literally the next year after my internship, there were like 10, 20 people from our degree that were
Hmm.
accepted in Amazon.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
do think that actually HR wasn't really familiar with our degree. I remember when we were talking
Yeah.
because we had a good relationship with HR. Like, I think they liked me as a person when I was applying. And also, I just met with them once for coffee and wanted to. I think I was just talking to them about YouTube videos or something. I don't remember, but I think they had this impression from either me or somewhere else that IMB is actually a good course. And I think this mindset shift happens in a lot of companies where someone from IMB will go there and then HR, I mean, HR is roughly the same team of people, right? Like a lot of the people will stay and then they will start to optimize. Like if they see
Yeah.
certain course or degree that they didn't know,
Hmm.
but that worked out in the past, they will start hiring more from that degree. And I think this is definitely what's happening now with IMB, which is a really exciting time to come into IMB, because I think now I'm just seeing so many people from IMB get into Amazon now. Like
Yeah.
it's becoming like, I feel like, I mean, obviously those are driven people and they're like great, but it's definitely at a far higher rate than it was before.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think from like what I've observed with IMB, so the School of Management, or like our sort of career counselor, their ties have strengthened in terms of alumni involvement at Amazon. I know that we went to their offices 2 years ago, maybe now, a year and a half ago.
yeah.
I'm not sure when it was, and like they have fairly strong ties with the alumni there. Try to organize some sort of events, networking, maybe a day at Amazon office, and those that from what I've seen, that tie has strengthened as well.
Hmm.
So IMB is a little bit closer to Amazon now, for sure.
And I think this is also important to say that this is also happening because Amazon now is growing super fast. Like
Yes, yeah,
especially their cloud division, it's like,
yeah.
especially, I mean, it's
A
like,
good. I know some alumni in the cloud division. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on there. It's
yeah,
high
there are
growth.
literally people coming in every week, and I think IMB is very well positioned to pick up a lot of those jobs. So I think if you
Hmm.
come into IMB now, I mean, I'm not saying just Amazon, like obviously tech companies in general are growing, and
Yeah.
I think IMB is getting more of a name for itself now and a
Hmm.
positive name. And
Yeah.
so I think when we came into the degree, like obviously it's just 4 years ago, but things even within those 4 years have changed, right? Like more companies now know um, about IMB and start to recognize it and start to trust it, right? Which is very
Yeah.
important.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's a definitely great time to be in IMB. A lot of great alumni in any company you can think of. I mean, we have alumni in any company. We have alumni in Google, in Amazon, any tech company, in JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey. You can reach out to people from our degree in the past in
Hmm.
any company, right? It's
Yeah,
very
it's pretty amazing how far the network reaches. Like any large company you can think of, on LinkedIn, you'll find someone who works at from IMB, which is great because the alumni are more than happy to help. And same goes with postgraduate studies. I'll mention this as well. Like if you're considering, going to Oxford or Stanford or even MIT, there's alumni anywhere, everywhere. I spoke to someone from IMT who graduated last year, I think. She was like a sort of more software engineering person, but yeah, she got into MIT. So
MIT.
there's people all over the place, whether it be company, postgraduate studies, all that, which is great. I'll also add, since I sort of just mentioned it, but we have a career counselor just for the IMB degree. I think that
Mm,
is a massive highlight,
that's
and it's
very
also very helpful. So normally the way careers work at universities is, UCL as a whole, they have a career department and they help out with 50 plus degrees, whereas our course, so just information management for business across all 4 years, um, or I guess 3 years, bachelor's. I think moving forward is not going to be a master's. Um, we have a career counselor just for those 3 years, which is incredible. And I think it's very helpful. It's a lot more sort of personalized in terms of, if you go to them, they'll know who you are, remember your background. They're sort of relatively up to date with what you've been doing if you do chat with them. And also they help organize networking events and that kind of stuff just for IMB people. And I think that is a massive, massive help going
mm.
forward into like a career.
Yeah, that's totally true. Um, I've been helped so many times by the career advisor. I mean,
Mark, thank you,
I
Mark.
Mark the Freitas, amazing guy. Uh, I mean, I literally, when I was applying in my first year for internships, he helped me so much. It's beyond me how much I actually rely on him. And if you talk to many people from our course, he has helped them a lot, right? Like people
Mhm.
love
Yeah.
him so much. It's not just that we have a career advisor, we have an amazing
Yeah,
guy.
exactly. It's not just someone there to fill in the spot for career. I mean, I think we even have more than one, but he's like the main. He's the
Right.
counselor, and then we have some other people in like the career department just for
Yeah,
IMB,
yeah. That's
working with like companies and whatnot.
mm.
But yeah, no, incredible guy. My CV is so much better. When I came in, my CV wasn't great, but yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. Honestly, it's a great advantage.
Yeah.
And that said, yeah, like so you can go into pretty much any company. Tech companies like Google is very unlikely to go into like
Yeah, Google is more of an engineering company, so they don't even
yeah,
necessarily target. I mean, sure, they have business internships, but also from what I know, you need Google contacts to get into Google. It's like the great filter um, for getting into Google. You need like a recommendation from inside. It's very, very difficult to
I
get
think I
in.
can comment on this as
Mhm.
well because I was interviewing with Google.
Yeah,
So
I never
I
got to
know
that
that,
stage. They rejected me.
yeah. Uh, you got to the which stage?
Oh, just the CV submission. I
Oh,
I
yeah,
I
yeah.
always get sorry, but I also I didn't reach out from the inside. So.
Okay, so I think that's why it's useful for me to mention this as well. Like, I think, yeah, there are some people who went into Google from our course, but they went into business roles. And the other two type of internships that they hire for is software engineering and like technical
Mm-hmm.
and associate product manager. And I don't think there is someone who intern does this role, but I think this is a good place that you can go into as IMB. That was where I was interviewing, and that was the one time I was interviewing with Google, and I was at the
Mm-hmm.
final stage. Um, so I was very close to break into Google in a 50% business and 50% technical role, which would have been something new for our degree to achieve. Um, but it's definitely I mean, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to get into the technical roles at Google unless you actually work hard on your own to be a good software
Yeah,
engineer.
you should like be aiming to like a software engineering career path, like doing extra programming and all that on the side. Because Google is like an engineering company at its core,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they're
it's
looking for those kinds of people.
yeah. So I think that's good to point out. But business roles, you can work in pretty much any company,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
any industry as well. I mean, people go into so
Yeah.
many
I
different
mean,
like.
you've worked at which companies? So you worked at Credit Agricole, right?
Yeah, so first I worked in a bank, then I worked in tech, and actually not even tech in the sense like I wasn't doing something technology wise so much. It was Amazon operations. So I was just doing data analysis on literally how packages are being delivered, right? And trying to optimize that. Um, and then in Cisco, I was actually working more on like technology aspects
Mm-hmm.
um, and data analysis as well. But you can go into any companies. I mean, people go into healthcare. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Like even something that's not necessarily strictly related to IMB, as long as there's like a technological
yeah,
factor involved, you can get in.
yeah,
Um,
just you need to have your own interest and pursue it
yes, yeah,
additionally to
absolutely.
the
Hmm.
degree. Because typically
Yeah,
you'll just get a business role.
yeah. And
Um,
there's also one thing I'll mention. There's a lot of companies that you'll learn about during the degree, during your university experience. Like Cisco, I didn't know Cisco at all before. I mean, like I saw their name on like I'm guessing phones,
yeah,
but like it's not a company you really hear of. So I did my first internship in IBM at the Wimbledon Championship. So that was like a very unique sort of thing with a tennis theme. Although that one it was like a technical role, but it wasn't like that deeply technical. But you know, IBM, everyone knows about that. Cisco, I had no idea what that was before I applied, to be honest. Now I know a lot more
it's
based
a
on
very
one. So
big.
you'll learn about a lot of companies you will never have heard of before, and they're very good and big
Yeah,
and successful companies.
totally. Yeah. Um, cool. Okay, so I think I'm actually excited about the next one as well. Future studies. This is super close to me as well.
Hmm.
And this is where I actually have some tea to spill on IMB.
Yeah,
Um, as you said, there are people who have went from IMB to study at Oxford and MIT, and I don't know of anyone in Stanford in particular.
I know one that's going to Stanford.
Oh, interesting. Current student.
Yes, current student.
Oh, wow.
Although they're technically like in the year above us, but because of our placement, they're in the same year. He was involved in the business game as well. He was in my team.
Interesting. Okay, you need to tell me more. That's cool.
It
Okay, so
remains anonymous for publicity reasons for now.
yeah. Okay, so we have people going to like any universities now, and it is possible. Um, what degree is he gonna do at Stanford? Do you know?
Oh, okay. His is like mathematically like heavy. Like it's some like mathematical engineering. I'm not sure how he got in. He must have had like really good electives. But a
Yeah,
lot of people like when I mentioned like Oxford and stuff before, it's more business side. It's
yeah,
very difficult. I think that's what you're going to get into if you want to do something technical, like say computer science. Okay, Imperial computer science is maybe an exception. They don't require that. Um, but a lot of places where you want to go deep into a subject, IMB is going to make it difficult. And I guess that's where you'll spill the tea a little bit more.
yeah. Let me spill some tea. So basically, it is possible to go from IMB to computer science, and I know one guy who did it, but that's a very edge case, right? Like the
Yeah, yeah.
problem with
It's rare.
IMB structure is because you don't study enough depth in engineering, you also don't cover certain prerequisite modules that you simply have to have if you want to apply to an engineering master's.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this includes like calculus, linear algebra, things like this, right? We don't cover these things in IMB, and
Yeah.
you don't even have the choice, or you're not even encouraged to follow these things, right? Like maybe it's possible, but it's not part of your recommended electives. And I think it should be, because if you just follow the standard IMB path, you're mostly closed off from pursuing further engineering degrees. And I think this is a
Yes.
bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I think it's very, very important for people who study IMB to be able to go into a segue where they can specialize further or take the necessary electives to then apply to engineering masters, which is currently very, very hard. Like it is almost impossible. It is, I mean, as I said, I know one person who did it, but that person actually taught himself software engineering and worked as a
Mm-hmm.
software engineer for 1 year. So it
Yeah.
definitely, it's not a standard situation, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's the requirement stage that's very difficult to get past. Because if they require, linear algebra modules, you don't have them. Well, too bad. They're not going to let you in because everyone else that applies there from like computer science backgrounds will have those kind of modules and experience.
yeah, and so you're very stuck with it.
Mhm.
And that was my experience because I wanted to do a master's in engineering.
Yeah.
And then every course is just a closed door for you because you don't have that background, right? So I
Hmm.
think this is very important to have in mind. So that's
Although,
basically,
although now as well, like the business landscape is sort of changing around degrees. I mean, I know in your mainland Europe, having a master's is very beneficial, whereas like in the UK, there's less reason to have it nowadays. I mean, unless you want to like specialize in something, but you don't really need a master's to get a good job anymore in the UK or even in the US. I know in the US, that's even less so the case. But yeah, the landscape is changing on that. So do keep in mind, whichever area you're going into, might not be that big of a benefit to do it unless you really want to specialize or really want to do it. But in the past, it's been kind of a requirement for a lot of jobs. I think that now I've seen a fairly big change where it's not necessarily required for a lot of stuff in the UK at least.
yeah, for sure. It's definitely not needed to do a master's. I think most people actually don't.
Yeah, I think from our degree, a lot of people go into just working straight
Yeah,
away.
IMB is enough. Like if you do IMB, you're employable, you have a good salary, you don't need to worry about masters. Like
Yeah.
the reason why some people do masters is more for, it's just like those are ambitious people that kind of want to
Mhm.
go the extra mile.
Yeah.
It's not like they have to do a masters, right?
Yeah,
They,
yeah, yeah. It's done with purpose nowadays
yeah.
because it's
Um,
expensive.
yeah, but honestly, that's my only big problem with IMB is that it
Mhm.
closes the door to further engineering studies to a large part.
Yeah,
Maybe it is possible to pull it off, but it is very
it's
hard,
difficult.
and
Yeah.
yeah, like, it's very edge case.
Hmm.
It is hard to also become a software engineer with IMB, but as I said, like that's more doable if you do your own projects.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Other than that, we've had interesting situations. Like there was a girl, again, very edge case. She's very impressive, but she went from IMB to do bioinformatics. So you have some interesting situations like that. I mean, one girl that I was speaking to at MIT, like she went into like kind of a business role, but like more data science related. So you can sort of move your way out a little bit, but you're kind of like your hands are a bit tied and you're
Yeah,
just,
you got an anchor that you're dragging
yeah,
behind
yeah,
basically,
you're
which is
wiggling,
like the lack of like algebra or math knowledge or like engineering
yeah.
components. So yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's,
I'd agree with that. For me, the math, I just wish there was more math. Even like if I don't plan on doing anything like masters that requires the math, I think it's still very beneficial for the future. Because math is more than just knowing how to multiply two matrices together. It opens up pathways for even potential like job pathways in the future. Because if you just don't have that prerequisite, it's very difficult to get into afterwards.
yeah. Okay, so this brings us to the final questions, which is IMB a joke of a degree? And was IMB actually worth doing? And a few more, but I think we can, I'm happy to start with, I think IMB, as we talked about, could be better. It could
Yes.
be more technical, and it should be more technical. It should have more advice to students who want to pursue. Like the way I see it, someone should just come and tell
Hmm.
students these are roughly the different options that you have. And it's almost like streams that you can follow.
Yeah.
And then there should be electives that you can take in order to achieve those different streams, right? Like at the
Yeah,
moment,
I feel like more electives would also help in that
yeah,
case. We
more.
only get free in our current sort of across all years. We get free electives, which isn't much considering there's 8 modules per year.
Yeah, for sure. Like for now, your electives almost don't play a role because you're just following. Most of your courses are mandatory, and even within the electives, there is not very much intent behind them. So like it's just a list of 20 electives, but I think they should group those electives into like if you want to follow this trajectory, it would be good to follow this, or like at least give you more context on if you want to study engineering masters in the future, they require these things,
Hmm.
right? So unless you do these electives, and these electives should be available to you, you cannot go to this route, right? So then the person can make a choice early on. Okay, I'm gonna take these electives because then I can go to engineering school later.
Hmm.
So I think definitely this could be changed and organized a lot better, and a lot more information can be given. But other than that, IMB I think is still an amazing degree, has a lot of potential. You will get a great job. You have a lot of opportunities with it. And I do think that management and business skills are super underrated. I think it is super valuable to be able to talk to people, to manage a team
Yeah.
of people,
Hmm.
um, to have breadth of experiences and decide based on more information from more areas.
Hmm.
It's really valuable. People are great in the course for the most part. But yeah, like it's a great degree, like in my opinion. And I'm disappointed that in the last year it was almost no technology to be studied. I mean, I felt like, yeah, first year it was very 50-50, and that was
Yeah.
maybe my favorite year. Second year it was kind of like 70-30. And then
Yeah.
last year it felt like zero technology to me.
Hmm.
Like uh, and it was very disappointing as well. Like it just declines. Whereas I think every year should be like 50-50, and you come out as like a fairly technical, strongly technical person. But I do think IMB is a great degree. It's far more employable than most degrees in the world. Um, and I think the only thing that's superior to IMB is actually studying STEM.
Hmm.
Uh, but then
As
again,
long as you do some businessy or management thing on the side.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, okay, unless you want to go like hardcore, like computer science, like just programmer. Uh, but if you want to sort of, get into like a managerial level afterwards, it really does help if you get involved in society or whatnot.
yeah, for sure, for sure. IMB is great if you want to be a manager in the future, by the way. Like
Yeah,
you should probably do IMB if you want to be a manager.
yeah, it's good. Yeah, and then my take on that is, yeah, very, very much similar to yours. So is IMB worth it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for international students, you have to weigh in the fact that it costs like 3 times more. I mean, okay, now with Brexit, EU students, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah,
But
now it's just either UK or international.
okay, yeah. So it's, I mean, that's like one factor to always consider. But if money is no object, then yeah, like Krasimir said, IMB I feel gets more hate than it should, and I kind of understand the perspective of the hate because like from the outside, it doesn't feel like we're doing a lot of work. And sure, while something like computer science, like you might have studied a lot more, in the end, the outcome is what matters, and the kind of transferable skills you actually gain to move forward in life with. And IMB does that really well. Like Rasimir said, you'll get a good job as long as you do a little bit, maybe extra on the side, or as long as you're driven. Um, but is it easier of a degree? I'd kind of argue maybe yes, work wise. There's a little bit less, but you'll see that the people who typically also kind of get sort of really good opportunities in the end. Maybe some really like unique position at one of the best companies out there. They typically put in a lot of effort outside of the course, or they're the ones in group projects that will carry the group forward.
Mhm.
If you put in the minimal effort, then I guess if everyone put in the minimal effort, then it would be like a joke of the degree. But IMB sort of fosters this I don't know, culture, I guess you could say, of, doing a little bit extra, and working your way. Just doing the degree is not enough. You got to get involved. Take advantage of everything that UCL offers. I think if you do that, and the outside perspective sees like the actual work that goes on behind the scenes, it's actually a good amount of work. I guess in Krasimir's case, in my case, we both had the same position at a society. So Krasimir was first, me later. That's a lot of work involved, and from a lot of other degrees, people just don't do that.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, what also gives sort of IMB people the edge. They know how to get involved in that, and they're generally very successful. They're the right kind of people to get into that. So I'd say no, absolutely not a joke of a degree, but I do understand the perspective if they meet certain kinds of people from the degree that just don't do enough.
I think this ties back into like people underappreciate business skills.
Yeah.
So in terms of learning hard knowledge, you will not learn as much hard knowledge as obviously if you're studying biology, for example, or computer science, where like everything about the degree is learning information, right? I mean,
Hmm.
skills as well, but IMB teaches you very important transferable skills. Like, for example, when we work in group projects, like there is a clear benefit. I mean, I've become far better at working with other people, and you can see that in the workplace as well. Like when I need to present something or when I need to, um, I mean, I would naturally lead the group because people don't know how to lead a group, right? And those are things that matter in the workplace.
Hmm.
So in the workplace, it's not about level of knowledge.
Yeah,
It's
because they'll
about,
always train you up. If you're the right person and you're lacking a little bit of knowledge here and there, they'll train you up. That's perfectly fine. But the
that's
core of a person is what's the thing that's the most difficult to change. Um,
yeah. And it's just, I think we have this wrong mindset that the more work you put in, um, this directly correlates to higher return or
yeah.
higher
Hmm.
reward or benefit. But it's not the case. Like you can put a lot of effort, but if you don't put that effort in the right place, obviously that's not gonna matter, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the good thing with IMB is that you maybe put a little bit less effort on studying, but you put effort on other things that matter a lot.
Hmm.
That is very important because even though you could be a great computer scientist, you don't study things that matter, such as like how to like work with people, or I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of like, I still think computer science is a better degree, but I think you miss certain important elements that within the workplace just have a lot of benefit.
Hmm. And it's the people elements specifically
Yeah.
that are important. And there, you can't just learn it very easily. It takes time, which is why, like, in a degree over 4 years, kind of builds up.
Yeah, yeah, it's very transferable. Like there's no formula to how to work with people, right? Like you cannot follow like a script. Those are things that unless you practice out many times, which I think the degree does a good job of
Hmm.
helping, it's just you won't know how to do it. I mean, it's just about experience and practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely great degree. I have no regrets at all. I'm very glad I chose it. I don't know what my other timeline would have been like if I went to Birmingham with like a computer science focus and then business on the side, like 30% business, how that would have changed. But I mean, looking at the opportunities I had, free internships total, the one upcoming, and then Chris as well, free internships, a lot of people as well, being involved in societies, learning incredible stuff I would have never expected to learn at university. Yeah, it's perfect. No regrets from my side.
Which is actually the last question of, do we regret something, whether we will do something differently, um, and etc.
I'd probably do a little bit extra like programming or whatnot on the side. Like I knew at the very beginning, similar to you, I don't want to be like a hardcore programmer at the end.
Mm.
But I also sort of knew that like if I knew a little bit of programming, it'd be very useful. Like in a lot of cases in the future, you'll do programming even if you're in a business role. So I wish I kind of did a little bit more of that on the side, online courses. But apart from, I mean, the things that I could change, I feel like it was fine. There wouldn't be much. I definitely still get involved in societies to the extent I did. And then, like, for example, in year three, because it was all online, I got involved in like kind of like society, but it's not UCL specific. It's across a few universities in London to learn more about consulting, and that was very very helpful as well for me to learn about that. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily change the mindset. I'd still keep it the same. I just maybe do a little bit more on the side, and I'd try and prevent Corona because that wasn't a great year. Like the whole interactivity of people and being involved in things in person is different.
Yeah, yeah. That's very good point about the technical aspect as well, and I would agree. Like, if I had to choose whether to do this degree all over again, I would probably do it
Hmm.
because not just because of the things that I learned within the degree, I would say it's more about I think those years in London studying in a top university like
Yeah,
UCL.
it's the entire experience that counts. It's not just the
Yeah,
hardcore things you learn.
yeah, literally, I would say even more what mattered was the people you meet and living in this city and the job offers you get, right? Like all those things are amazing. Like I think learnings from the course is definitely not the biggest benefit of it.
Hmm.
Um, but if I had to give myself some advice, it would be the world is becoming a technological world. As I said this many times, like this is people need to understand that you need to learn technical skills. It's not like a prefer. I mean, of course, you don't have to if you want to go into other areas, but the benefit of doing it is just a no-brainer, right? Like you need to pick up a coding language, you need to learn more technical skills. And so what I would give myself as advice is look at what masters in engineering has as requirements and do everything possible to follow that trajectory because I think that's a very valuable extension of IMB. And
Hmm.
I think that the biggest benefit you can have to the world is if you do IMB and then you still manage to go into engineering and you're still a relatively technical person. Um, and so that's my advice, and that's what I wish I would have done. Like just focused more on how do I get into a grad school in engineering, like for example, masters in computer science in a really good university, and just take the electives in regards to that, and also just try to meet more people from those degrees that I want to do. Reach out to people. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. By the way, like people like helping out, and
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
if
Hmm.
you have alumni network or something. Like I mean, if someone reaches out to me in a really nice way and is like, oh, I just want to ask you for a little bit of advice or something like this, can we have a 15-minute call? Like, I'll probably say yes because it's just nice to help out people who are in the same place that you were a few years ago and you know that you can help them out and
Yeah.
you know how valuable it could have been to you as well. So I think you should reach out to people who are in the places that you want.
Yeah,
And
and don't be afraid to reach out as well. Like it's no
yeah,
bother at all. Or like I mean, if you're like in high school, you might not have LinkedIn. A lot of universities, you'll find people. I mean, I guess maybe on Facebook you can find it, but a lot of universities also have like some sort of program where you can reach out to people on the course. So Uni Buddy is like the one I'm involved in. So that's the only brand I know. But there's if even if you don't have like LinkedIn, you can find people, Facebook or whatever it might be. You'll find someone around to ask.
yeah, typically
We don't bite. We don't bite. We're more than happy to help.
yeah, and typically if you just use LinkedIn, like it should be okay. Like just send a message to the person that has the same things that you want to achieve, or someone who is like studying computer science or something. Also, I would join just more technical societies. I was focused on more business societies.
Yeah, yeah,
I really enjoyed this, but I think there are great opportunities to join, like for example, UCL Artificial Intelligence Society or UCL Technology.
yeah.
And
The AI society has improved a lot last year. Whoever the president was did a big rebranding. It's
mm,
become better.
yeah, so I think if you join these societies and try to consciously be around more technical people from more
Hmm.
engineering degrees, I think this also helps out a lot.
Yeah,
And try to learn in your free time. I mean, engineering is not as scary as people think it is. Like, if you think about it, you're just, I mean, everything is just about learning, right? And unless you put yourself barriers and you like scare yourself off, it's just like sitting down and starting from the basics and being like, okay, like, how do I learn this? And um, you just start reading online. There is so much documentation on everything online. You just need to start from the basics, read what people have written for beginners. And there are great tutorials that, as long as you just follow the step by step, you will get there, right? Like you will learn things, and there's not so much to be afraid of when you take it like systematically and you learn. So as a conclusion, I will just give myself the advice to have a goal of what I want to do after IMB from the beginning. Ideally. And I think for me that would be just go to engineering school after, or just be a better engineer, and then just try to optimize for that path throughout the degree through all of these things.
Yep, absolutely. Fully agree on that. And just little thing to add on that, in terms of learning, when you're at UCL, you have a license to what used to be Linda, which is now LinkedIn Learning. So instead of buying courses, even though they're like 10, 15 euros on like Coursera, you get free like learning material available online. So use it. If you're interested in something, watch a few videos. They're fairly like easy to understand and follow as well, because they offer beginner level ones.
Yeah. Well, that's basically it. It
That's
was rather
IMB in a nutshell, a long nutshell, big nutshell, but
in a watermelon.
that's IMB in a watermelon.
I do think it was long, but I hope it was really useful. And I think that is the most extensive we could cover IMB, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah. No, honestly, I mean, there's so much you have to just live through it. But yeah, in terms of covering every single aspect, I think that's what we did.
yeah, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, let us know if you have other questions, or if you applied to IMB in the end, or if you didn't, or which choices you applied to. Every like and every comment really helps us out, and just building my channel. And I would appreciate you subscribing as well for more similar
Yeah,
content.
if you see the red button and it says subscribe, click it. It means you're not subscribed. You're missing out on good content. Click it.
Exactly. And yeah, that would really help me out, and I would love to have you as a person to come back to my future videos. And with that
Pleasure.
said, thank you so much, Patryck, for joining in,
Thank you, Krasimir, for having this conversation.
and good luck to anyone applying.